They said later that the arena went silent before Corleth hit the wall, that the silence moved faster than the round itself, chasing the screaming shockwave as the Tazrak champion cartwheeled through the reinforced alloy-like paper and left a crater shaped roughly like a very surprised lizard. All I remember is my shoulder slamming backward, my ears ringing, and the ridiculous thought that I should have worn earplugs if I knew I was going to embarrass an entire warlike species on live galactic broadcast. A moment before the shot, the arena had been a riot of color and noise, tier upon tier of alien spectators pressed against shimmering safety fields, tentacles and claws and chitinous limbs waving banners in languages my translator could not be bothered to render. It was the annual Galactic Union Weapons Exchange demonstration, which made it sound like a friendly science fair instead of what it really was, a massive collective arms flex where everyone tried to prove that their way of killing things was the most elegant, efficient, and profitable. Hover screens hung in the air, replaying earlier highlights on loop, a Carix fusion lance vaporizing an asteroid chunk, a Soli nanite swarm eating through a tank in 5 seconds, a dozen other marvels of physics and malice. Then it was Earth's turn, and the laughter started before the crate even opened. The Union announcer, a floating jellyfish with a voice like wind chimes in a blender, tried to keep things neutral as 2 human techs wheeled out the matte black case on a gravcart. Representing the young world of Earth, the announcer sang out, "We have their latest contribution to defensive technology, designated," and here it paused as if buffering, "Elephant Gun." The subtitle popped up on every screen in the arena, in a dozen languages, all translating to the same thing: gun for shooting oversized animals that should probably be left alone. The laughter rolled over us like a wave. Near the front row, a cluster of slim, crystalline diplomats actually glittered brighter as they shook with amusement. Somewhere above, a camera drone zoomed in on my face, transmitting my expression to half the civilized galaxy. I kept my features calm and neutral, the way they had trained us. I was Sergeant Mason Reed, United North American Defense, seconded to Project Thunderjaw, primary field operative, and, at this very moment, the official representative of primitive ballistic stupidity. Beside me, Ambassador Perez murmured, "Remember, just follow the script. No improvising. We are guests here. Do not start a war." I eyed the crate as the techs unclamped it, and the elephant gun rose on its mount like an altarpiece at a very illegal church. It was not elegant. It did not hum with energy. It did not glow or phase or project holographic targeting solutions into the air. It was a massive, brutal, dull weapon, all steel and composite, thick barrel and overbuilt frame, like someone had asked an engineer to design a cannon that hated everything in front of it on principle. The stock was fitted for a human shoulder, the recoil system buried deep inside, the loading port yawning open like a mouth waiting to be fed. "Old-fashioned," someone in the crowd shouted, and the translator whispered the insult into my ear in perfect English. "Did you raid a museum, human?" another voice chimed in. Even the announcer was having a hard time keeping their tone level. For comparison, most galactic weapons used energy, or magnetics, or some exotic field manipulation that looked like magic and cost as much as a small moon. Ballistics were considered crude, messy, and beneath serious militaries, like throwing rocks in an age of railguns. Unfortunately for our critics, humans were very, very good at throwing rocks. Across the arena floor, Corleth made his entrance. The Tazrak Dominion champion needed no introduction, but he got one anyway, his name booming from hidden speakers as the crowd roared. He was 3 meters tall in full armor, plated in overlapping scales of dark metal that shimmered with internal energy, each plate etched with battle honors. Slitted golden eyes watched us with predatory boredom. He was famous for decapitating a battle mech with his bare hands and for personally ending 3 planetary rebellions by walking through their front lines and not stopping until there was no line left. Today, he was here as security and, unofficially, as entertainment. The Tazrak loved a good humiliation. Corleth strutted to the center of the kill floor and gestured grandly toward the elephant gun. "Is this truly your finest, human?" his voice boomed through the translators. "Or did your elders dig this up from the mud where your ancestors first learned to stand upright?" More laughter. I stepped forward, helmet off, letting the cameras catch my face, my very human, very mortal face. The Union broadcast overlay helpfully labeled me as Mason Reed, species designation human, technological classification developing, emotional stability flagged as irregular. That last part was unfair. My heart was steady, my breathing calm. I had been nervous when they first asked me to fire the gun in front of the galaxy. Then I learned Corleth would be the volunteer. That made it easier. This weapon is designed for dangerous megafauna on our homeworld, I said, voice level. We call it an elephant gun not as a joke, but as a warning. Translated laughter rippled through the arena again, like static. A warning, Corleth echoed, baring rows of serrated teeth. He stomped over to a control panel and slapped a massive clawed hand down. A thick steel gray wall rose from the arena floor with a grinding rumble, its surface gleaming with the dull sheen of layered composites and anti-energy mesh. Union-grade blast shielding, rated to withstand direct plasma impacts. He walked behind it and thumped the metal once with his fist. Then he leaned around the edge to look at me, his eyes bright with cruel amusement. You will fire your primitive toy. If it can even scratch this wall, human, I will admit that you are something more than prey pretending at claws. If not, perhaps the Union can use you as a historical exhibit. Cameras repositioned, screens zoomed, commentary feeds lit up with alien text. Bets were placed in a dozen currencies. Ambassador Perez muttered something in Spanish that my translator mercifully did not render. I stepped up to the gun, feeling its weight settle into my hands, the familiar give of the recoil dampers under my grip. The ammo technician rolled over a small armored case and popped it open, revealing a single massive cartridge nestled inside, the length of my palm, the casing in odd, dark metal that drank the light. The projectile nose was blunt, ugly, and slightly iridescent. Dark mass core, shaped charge, layered kinetic penetrator, and a few other classified surprises all crammed into one insult to conservation laws. I lifted the round, every movement careful, almost reverent, and slid it into the open port. The mechanism closed with a solid, satisfying clunk that echoed through the arena, somehow louder than the crowd. A hush fell, thin at first, then spreading as the idea that this might not be entirely farce finally penetrated. I set my feet, braced the stock into my shoulder, and sighted down the heavy frame. Through the targeting optics, the world narrowed to the center of the wall, They did not arrest me immediately. For about 30 seconds after Corleth went through the wall, the entire Galactic Union weapons exchange existed in a kind of shared software crash. The announcer jellyfish floated in stunned silence, its bioluminescent patterns flickering through 3 era colors I had not seen before. The crowd was frozen, every eye and lens and sensor locked on the smoking crater and the hole punched through Union-grade shielding. Even the security drones hung motionless in the air, their target prioritization routines presumably trying to decide whether the biggest threat was me, the gun, or the laws of physics rewritten in front of them. Ambassador Perez stepped up beside me very slowly, like someone trying not to startle a wild animal. Mason, she whispered without moving her lips, why did you say low power setting? Because it was, I answered under my breath. Her eyes closed briefly. The jellyfish flickered back to something like composure, and finally found its voice. Demonstration concluded, it chimed, tones higher than before. Medical and structural response teams are being dispatched. It started to float away, then hesitated, tendrils curling in confusion. Would the human delegation please remain where they are? That was the formal way of saying do not run, you are probably under arrest. The arena floor exploded into motion. Med teams sprinted toward the far wall where Corleth had vanished, armored engineers checking the shattered shielding while a cloud of micro-drones swept the area, sampling air, metal, residue. My weapon was quickly encased in a stasis field projected by 3 hovering security units, the elephant gun freezing mid-air like a museum display, its barrel still smoldering faintly. 2 larger drones drifted closer to me, projecting overlapping cones of shimmering light. Non-lethal stun fields, according to the training brief. I did not move. I could feel 1,000 cameras zooming in on my face, looking for remorse, fear, triumph, anything. All they got was disciplined stillness and the faint, unwelcome tug of adrenaline in my gut. Around us, the laughter was gone, burned away and replaced with something sharper. Some eyes watched with fear, some with anger, some with greedy calculation. A weapon that could do that to a Tazrak champion in Union armor in one shot was not just a curiosity. It was a market disruption. The summons came an hour later, after Korluth had been excavated from his personal crater and wheeled past us in a reinforced medical cocoon. He was alive, which was either good news or the beginning of a much worse problem. His armor was ruined, shattered plates clinging to his bulk and twisted segments, but his chest still rose and fell under the medical field. At one point, what was left of his face turned almost in my direction. His slitted golden eyes opened a fraction, met mine through the crystal shell, and something like a grin tugged at one corner of his bloody jaw before the cocoon whisked him away. The Security Council chamber was a different kind of arena, one where the weapons were words and the wounds took years to show. It was a massive amphitheater of dark stone and hovering platforms, each platform holding the delegation of a different species. The ceiling was a projection of the galaxy itself, slowly spinning, with certain sectors highlighted in different colors according to treaties, alliances, or grudges. At the center, on a raised disc, stood the circular dais reserved for the party on trial. That was us. I took my place behind Ambassador Perez, standing slightly to her right, the official position of a military attaché, unofficially the spot closest to incoming fire. Two other human delegates flanked her, both in tailored suits that tried to look casual and failed. A faint transparent barrier separated our disc from open air, the kind that could stop a meteor and yet was marketed as purely ceremonial. The council lord presiding over this session was an elder of the crystalline species I had seen laughing in the arena. Now its light was dimmer, refracted through jagged facets as it slowly rotated at the highest point of the chamber. Voices from 100 translators murmured and crackled through the air, each delegation conferring privately before the session began. Ambassador Perez straightened as the central chime rang out. Esteemed members of the Galactic Union's Security Council, she began, voice steady, the human demonstration was conducted under approved protocols with full latency controls in place. The reaction was immediate. Latency controls, hissed a representative from the Carix, a tall, thin creature that looked like an emaciated shadow wrapped in a cloak of starlight. You broke a Dominion champion through a shielded wall. You call that controlled? The Tazrak envoy did not speak at first. He did not need to. He simply glared at us, an enormous reptilian presence coiled on his hovering platform, armored from neck to tail, eyes burning like twin suns. When he finally spoke, the sound cut through every other murmur. The human used a concealed superweapon against my clan's greatest warrior. This was not a demonstration. It was an attack meant to humiliate the Dominion. He leaned forward, claws scraping the edge of his platform. I demand that the shooter be turned over to us for questioning. Translation, torture and eventual decorative dismemberment. Perez did not flinch. Under Union law, all demonstration parameters were approved and reviewed by this council, she said. The weapon used was cleared. Its mass, energy potential, and design schematics were certified as within agreed thresholds. If you failed to appreciate the threat level, that is a matter of your analysis, not our deceit. A low murmur of appreciation rippled around part of the chamber. Some of the smaller civilizations, the ones used to being pushed around, always enjoyed seeing a major power embarrassed. The council lord rotated slowly, the light within its crystalline form shifting. Before any disposition is decided, it said, we must establish fact. Human Mason Reed, step forward. I stepped up beside Perez, feeling the scrutiny like weight. The barrier hummed faintly as it adjusted to my movement. Did you intend to kill Korluth of the Dominion? The council lord asked, or was the lethality of your device miscalculated? A dozen lawyers back home had drilled the answer into me so thoroughly I could have recited it under anesthesia. The demonstration was calibrated using the best available simulations, I said. The target environment was rated to safely absorb the expected impact. The result exceeded projections. That much was even true, in a way. The penetration depth had surprised our engineers in testing as well. They had smiled for 3 days straight. Some delegations muttered disbelief, others interest. The Dominion envoy bared his teeth in something that was not a smile. Your primitive ballistics should not have been able to pierce Union shielding, it snarled. You have hidden technology, forbidden materials. You have cheated. At the word cheated, something in me bristled. Before I could open my mouth, Perez flicked 2 fingers behind her back, a tiny gesture. The Dominion did not send a war declaration. They sent an invitation written in careful diplomatic language that sounded like mercy and read like bait. It arrived the next morning while I was still in protective housing. A pale, fur-eyed clerk from the Union Secretariat handed a tablet to Ambassador Perez, and kept his eyes down as if looking at me might be contagious. Perez read in silence. I watched the muscle in her jaw tighten, then jump twice. Finally she spoke. The Dominion proposes a reconciliation summit, she said. Private meeting. Limited human delegation. Neutral platform. Union observers. Her thumb flicked to the last lines. And they insist the human who fired the shot attends in person. So they want to talk about their feelings, I said. That is progress. She did not even pretend to smile. Mason, this is a trap. Of course, I said. The question is whether we can afford to act like we know that. The Security Council decided we could not. Within hours they met in emergency session and announced that they welcomed the Dominion Initiative for Peaceful Dialogue. Earth, as a responsible new member, was urged to accept in the spirit of interspecies harmony. Translated, that meant please go let them scream at you somewhere private so they stop doing it in here. At the final briefing I stood behind our seats in the council chamber, at parade rest, the official piece of hardware attached to the human delegation. The semicircle of alien representatives watched from their floating platforms, expressions ranging from hostile to greedy. The crystalline council lord rotated slowly above, light refracting along its facets. The Union will provide full monitoring, it said. The rendezvous point is a registered neutral habitat in low orbit. All safety guarantees apply. Perez laced her fingers together. And if those guarantees are violated, who enforces them? There was a short silence. A few delegates suddenly needed to check their data slates. The council lord dimmed a fraction. The Union will investigate any irregularities with utmost seriousness. Which was a poetic way of saying that if this went bad they would write a very detailed report about how it happened. Perez sighed through her nose. If we refuse, Earth looks like the one backing away from peace, she murmured. If we accept, we step into something we cannot control. Then we control what we can, I said. The elephant gun was not an accident. Neither are we. Let them think they are driving. She looked back at me, measuring. She had seen me put a Dominion champion through a wall, and then crack a line for the cameras. Eventually she nodded once. Decision made. The neutral platform was a slim spindle of metal and glass circling far above the Union Capitol, used for private negotiations that needed to feel important without belonging to any one world. That day a shuttle rose toward it with a very small human team aboard and a cloud of Union monitoring drones following at the treaty distance. There were 4 of us in the shuttle cabin. Perez in a dark suit, posture straight enough to crack. A junior diplomat named Haruko, younger than me and trying not to look terrified. Dr. Laird, one of Project Thunderjaw lead physicists, dragged out of her lab and into formal clothes that did not quite know what to do with her. And me, in dress uniform, shoulders still faintly bruised from the demonstration and very aware that everyone pretending to be calm kept glancing my way. Laird sat opposite me, fingers tapping her knees as the shuttle detached. You know this is going to go badly, she said. The Dominion does not host tea parties. That is why you are here, I said. If they show you anything clever, I want to know how impressed I should be before I break it. She let out a short, unwilling laugh. Your confidence is deeply unhealthy. Out the viewport the habitat grew from a bright point into a ring of modules rotating around a central spine, docking arms stretching outward like the spokes of a metal wheel. Behind us, the monitoring drones held formation, glittering against the dark. From the ground it probably looked reassuring. From our angle it looked like an audience taking their seats. Docking clearance came on time. The hatch cycled, pressures equalized, and the inner door slid open onto a corridor washed in neutral light and neutral colors, the decorating style of committees that fear complaints more than boredom. 3 habitat administrators waited, thin bipedal figures with smooth faces displaying scrolling text instead of expressions. "Welcome, esteemed delegates," the center one said in a bland, pleasant voice. "This platform recognizes the authority of the Galactic Union. Please proceed to Conference Hall 1. Conference Hall 1 was a round room with a central table and transparent walls showing the curve of the planet below. 4 seats on our side. 4 opposite, empty. Cameras in each corner watched without blinking. An emergency force field emitter hummed overhead. On paper it was exactly what a neutral meeting should look like, which made the hair on my neck itch. The Dominion likes to arrive late, to make others wait. Exactly on schedule, the far door slid open and their delegation walked in. There were only 3 of them. The same Dominion envoy from the Security Council, armor polished to a mirror shine and clan sigils freshly cut, led the way. To either side walked 2 tall guards in heavier plate, visors down, weapons peace locked at their hips. Perez rose and offered the shallow bow that signaled equal status. "Envoy Tarkesh," she said, "we appreciate your willingness to seek a peaceful resolution." Tarkesh did not bow. His gaze moved over Perez, Haruko, and Laird, then fixed on me. His lip lifted just enough to show a line of sharp teeth. "Peace," he said, "is one possible outcome. If I had been watching as a recording, I might have seen all the little wrong details at once." The faint second echo under his voice that did not quite fit the room. The way both guards turned their heads in perfect synchrony. The tiny delay between our words and the flicker of the red logging light on the Union oversight panel. In real time I only felt the change in the background noise. The hum of the emergency field shifted a half-tone higher, a vibration behind my eyes. It was the kind of thing you learn to notice after years spent near generators held together with tape and prayer. I glanced up at the ceiling, then at Perez. She caught the look and frowned. Envoy Tarkesh gestured to the table. "Sit," he said. "Let us speak frankly about what comes next for your volatile species." We never sat down. The walls went black, then blinding white, then clear again. One heartbeat they showed the blue-green curve of the Union homeworld and the crowded ribbon of orbital traffic. The next, the planet was gone. In its place hung a hard field of stars and the jagged silhouette of a Dominion dreadnought, hull bristling with weapon mounts and hangar bays like the open jaws of a predator. Haruko gasped. Laird grabbed the back of a chair and swore softly. "Transit fold," she said. "They jumped the entire habitat. That should not be possible here." For 3 seconds nobody moved. The hum of the dreadnought's systems pressed against my eardrums like a storm waiting to break, the air thick with the metallic taste of artificial gravity. Perez inhaled sharply, Haruko whispered something too soft to catch, and Dr. Laird stared at the walls with the horrified fascination of a scientist watching physics receive an uninvited punch to the face. Envoy Tarkesh watched us with the patient stillness of a snake that had spent weeks preparing the moment its prey would realize the cage door had locked. His guards shifted their weight just enough to unseal their weapons, the faint click swallowed by the oppressive silence. I felt the shift in the floor plating first, a vibration subtle as a heartbeat. We had not just been moved. The entire neutral habitat had been swallowed whole and anchored to the dreadnought's hull like a parasite grafted into a predator. The Dominion had not violated treaty space. They had stolen the treaty platform itself. Tarkesh spoke with a measured softness that made the words colder. "Your union believes itself clever. They hide the human weapon in bureaucracy and procedure. They think we will forget humiliation." He leaned forward. "We do not forget. And we do not forgive." Perez stepped slightly in front of Haruko, palms visible, movements precise and diplomatic. "Envoy Tarkesh, abducting delegates violates every interspecies agreement ever signed. Release us immediately or the Union will take action." There was a pause, and then he laughed. It was not loud but sharp, cracking the air. "The Union will deliberate," he said. "They will send messages. They will form committees. They will do what prey always does when predators hunt." His gaze returned to me. You! Mason Reed. My champion awakens. He remembers the wall. He remembers the laughter. And he wishes to demonstrate that the Dominion does not fall. The floor jolted suddenly as the dreadnought shifted course, gravity flickering for a heartbeat like a dropped signal. Dr. Laird stumbled and grabbed my arm for balance. When she looked up, her eyes were fierce behind the fear. They want you alive, she whispered. That is leverage. That means we can still make noise. Tarkesh snapped his claws and the guards stepped toward us. I felt the weight of the moment settle on my spine like armor. The time for diplomacy had ended the instant they stole the platform. There was no negotiation to stall, no agreement to make. This was extraction, intimidation, and spectacle. They wanted to parade me before Corlith, and whatever Dominion audience salivated for vengeance. When the guards reached us, Perez straightened, calm enough to be terrifying. We will go because we are unarmed, she said quietly. But understand this. You are not taking a prisoner. You are taking a problem. They bound our wrists with magnetic restraints that hummed against my skin. I tested the strength with a small, subtle twist. Strong. Too strong. Whatever chance I would have would not come from brute force. It would have to come from timing, chaos, and the one advantage humans always had. Adaptation. They marched us into a curving corridor lit in Dominion colors, deep reds and metallic blacks, the air vibrating with the drone of reactors and the distant thrum of weapons cycling on standby. The habitat module we had been stolen inside was now grafted to a wider hall. Beyond its clean walls, everything was rougher, harsher, built for creatures twice my size. Pipes ran exposed overhead, thick as tree trunks. Crates stenciled with Dominion sigils sat stacked in alcoves, the symbols meaning ammunition, fuel cells, or do not touch unless you have a death wish. Guards led us toward a lift platform embedded in the floor. As it lowered, the ship opened beneath us like the throat of some steel beast. Distant roars and clashing metal echoed up through the shaft. Perez stiffened. Dr. Laird whispered, "That is a crowd. A very large one. They are taking us to an arena." The platform descended into a massive chamber ringed with tier upon tier of alien spectators, all Dominion. The stands trembled with anticipation, a living storm of reptilian voices, thunderous growls, and savage hisses. Energy barriers flickered around the edge of the arena floor, keeping the crowd back but letting their fury wash over us. It felt like stepping into the core of a volcano. At the center of the arena floor rose a metal pillar, wide and uneven, like a stage built for violence instead of theater. Atop it lay chains thick enough to anchor a shuttle. The crowd roared louder as we were marched toward it. This was not merely punishment. This was a message to the galaxy. Tarkesh spread his arms, voice carrying through amplifiers hidden in the walls. "Behold the humans," he announced. "The species that mocks warriors with toys. The ones who hide behind laws. The ones who dare make a Dominion champion bleed." Corlith stepped into the arena from a gate on the far side and the crowd erupted. He wore no helmet now, his massive head exposed, the scars of his impact still livid across his snout. His armor had been reforged, gleaming, layered, and inscribed with new marks of vengeance. The sight of me seemed to relight something feral inside him. He lifted one clawed hand slowly, almost reverently, and ran it across the dented remnants of the armor plate that had failed to save him. Then he dropped the ruined piece to the floor with a crash that echoed across the arena. "Bring him," Corlith growled. 2 guards seized me by the arms. But they made a mistake. They assumed a bound human was a compliant one. They had never tried to restrain someone trained by Project Thunderjaw. I let them pull me forward until my boots touched the base of the pillar. Then I moved. It was not a dramatic explosion of strength. It was precise. Tactical. A shift of balance, a pivot of the wrist, a drop of center mass. The restraints limited my arms, but nothing limited my legs. I swept one guard off his feet with a snap kick to the knee joint, and rammed my shoulder into the second, knocking him backward into a crate. Perez, Haruko, and Laird dove aside as the arena erupted in shocked growls. For 5 seconds it worked. 5 glorious seconds. Then Corlith moved. The champion launched himself across the arena in a single leap that shook the floor. His hand wrapped around my throat and lifted me into the air with contemptuous ease. He brought me close until I saw every crack in his battered scales, every fleck of dried blood, every tremble of hatred. His voice rumbled like distant artillery. "You fly well, little hunter. Let us see how you fall." He hurled me into the metal pillar. Pain flashed white behind my eyes. The crowd howled approval. I pushed myself to my knees through the ringing haze, lungs burning, restraints cutting into my wrists. Corliss circled me, savoring every second, letting the crowd taste his victory before consuming it. Then something unexpected happened. Dr. Laird, unarmed, terrified, furious, shouted across the arena. "Mason! Vault panel! 2 meters left." I looked. A maintenance hatch set into the pillar base. Small. Locked. But not sealed. And the Dominion guards were still recovering from the chaos. Corlith lunged. I dove. My shoulder hit the panel, and it popped open with a clang. Cold air rushed out. Machinery hummed inside. Cables, conduits, power feeds, and most. Smoke clung to the air like mist over a battlefield at dawn, except this dawn belonged to a Dominion dreadnought, and thousands of spectators still hungry for blood. The instant the generator exploded, the arena descended into chaos. Alarms wailed, harsh metallic notes beating in rhythm with my pulse. The shock wave had torn apart the nearest sections of the platform, buckling metal and sending shards skittering across the floor. Corlith lay sprawled near the far wall, scales smoking, armor cracked open along one side like a split shell. But he was moving. Of course he was. A Dominion champion did not die from the first blast, or the second. They died when their bones refused to stand and their rage ran out. Corlith's rage had not even begun to fade. I staggered forward through the haze, feeling blood trickle along my arm where jagged fragments had sliced skin. The restraints on my wrists were half melted, weakened by the generator blast. I twisted hard and felt the lock give with a small metallic snap. My hands came free, and the sudden sensation of unbound fingers sent a surge of focus through my mind. Above us the crowd roared, a sound of fury and disbelief. Dominion guards in the stands scrambled to secure the perimeter, shouting orders drowned by the storm of voices. I had not given myself much time. The explosion had been loud enough to scramble sensors and for a few seconds confuse weapon locks. A few seconds was all the human defense labs ever designed me to need. At the far edge of the arena floor I saw it. A reinforced vault gate, half concealed behind a collapsed stack of crates. Painted over with Dominion symbols of restricted access. Beneath the paint, faint scorch marks betrayed a recent welding job. They had transported something through here. Something heavy. Something important. Something human. Dr. Laird had told me before we left Earth that the Dominion would not risk destroying the elephant gun. They wanted to study it, reverse engineer it, break it open to find out how something so crude had embarrassed their brightest pride. They would keep it close, under heavy guard, near a structural anchor or a tactical hub. Which meant that behind that gate was not just my weapon. It was the real prototype. The Thunderjaw Mk2. And if I could reach it, I had a chance to level this battlefield. Corliss surged up with a roar that vibrated the arena floor. His eyes blazed with a murderous glow. Smoke drifted from between his teeth. He planted one hand on the ground and rose with the slow inevitability of a mountain waking up. I did not wait for him to finish standing. I sprinted. The crowd screamed warnings in their guttural language, a collective cry urging Corlith to give chase. He did. His footsteps hammered behind me, each one shaking the metal plates beneath my boots. No human could outrun a champion. But I did not need to outrun him. I needed to reach the gate first. As I neared the wall, 2 Dominion guards vaulted from an access ramp, blocking my path with shock pikes crackling in purple arcs. I slid beneath the thrust of the first weapon, felt the heat sear the top of my shoulder, and surged to my feet inside their guard. My elbow cracked into the first guard's jaw. He dropped. The second swung too wide, expecting I would retreat. Instead I stepped into the arc, grabbed his wrist, twisted until the bones gave, and hurled him into the shattered railing. The crowd howled. For a moment the entire ship's hunger was focused on this corner of the arena. The vault gate loomed ahead. A biometric lock read Dominion patterns only. No override existed for human hands. But Dominion tech had a weakness. They built everything assuming brute strength would always be enough. I grabbed the fallen guard's shock pike, jammed its sparking tip into the seam between the doors, and slammed my shoulder into the base of the pole. Electricity arced wildly. The lock shrieked. The mechanisms buckled. The doors slid apart 2 inches, then 4, then enough for me to wedge fingers inside and pry. Human bone should not have been able to do that. But adrenaline and survival rewrote limits. The metal groaned out a protest, and then parted. Inside was a dimly lit chamber lined with Dominion storage pods. And resting on a reinforced rack in the center of the room was something shaped like a nightmare given steel form. Longer than the elephant gun prototype. Thicker barrel. Reinforced chassis. Stabilizer vents along its spine glowing faint blue from hibernation mode. This was Thunderjaw Mk2, the weapon Earth had not dared to show the galaxy. Its presence made the air vibrate like the heartbeat of a sleeping engine. I reached for it. The moment my fingers touched the grip, the hibernation lights flared. The gun recognized human biometrics only. Dominion scientists must have tried to activate it, and failed. Behind me Corleth roared again, closer now. His shadow stretched across the floor of the vault. He strode through the broken doorway, body steaming, eyes wide with the fury of a disgraced god. His voice cracked the chamber. You steal your way into our heart, little hunter. You hide in metal burrows. You throw sparks and call yourself warrior. Come out and see how a champion kills. I hefted the Thunderjaw Mk2. It was heavier than the elephant gun by a margin that would break an untrained soldier's arms. But Project Thunderjaw surgeons had wired my muscles, bones, and tendons years ago for a purpose exactly like this. I stepped into the light of the doorway. Corleth saw the weapon. His expression flickered. Not fear. Recognition. The Dominion had always believed themselves the peak of war. Seeing a human hold something that challenged that belief gave him a moment of hesitation. It was all the opening I needed. The Thunderjaw's power core pulsed against my fingers as I chambered around the size of a small baton. The mechanism locked with a thundering clank. Corleth crouched, preparing to lunge. Around us the crowd fell silent as if some instinctive ancestral memory warned them that what came next would be carved into their history forever. Corleth sprang. I fired. The shot was not like the elephant gun's first demonstration. It was not thunder. It was catastrophe channeled into a straight line. The recoil slammed into my shoulder hard enough to rattle my teeth. A cone of distorted air ripped down the length of the arena as if reality itself recoiled. The round hit Corleth dead center. His body folded in on itself like a collapsing tower as the impact launched him backward, smashing through the far arena wall and taking half the corridor beyond it with him. The detonation echoed through the dreadnought like a giant exhaling. Screams erupted from the crowd. Alarms blared. Structural supports groaned loudly as the arena's upper tiers trembled. I saw flames licking at the broken corridor where Corleth had vanished. Whether he was alive or dead did not matter. That blast had taken him out of this fight. But the ship was wounded, and the Dominion would retaliate fast. I adjusted my grip on the Thunderjaw Mk2, turned toward the nearest access ramp, and ran. Smoke curled around me like hungry fingers. The dreadnought shuddered beneath my boots. Every klaxon screamed boarding protocols. I had wounded their champion. I had damaged their ship. Now I needed to escape before the Dominion made sure no human ever left this place alive. The dreadnought lurched beneath me with the uneven shudder of a wounded beast, the kind that lashed out blindly as pain rippled through its steel veins. I sprinted through the fractured corridor, boots thudding against metal plates that vibrated under the strain of failing stabilizers. Every alarm on the ship screamed at once, shrill warnings layered over the deep, resonant pulse of hull breaches, ceiling and reactor cores overcompensating. Smoke curled from ruptured conduits overhead, drifting like ghostly ribbons through the flickering emergency lights. Somewhere behind me, Dominion soldiers roared commands, their heavy footfalls echoing through the mangled halls as they regrouped after the arena's destruction. I tightened my hold on the Thunderjaw Mk2, its weight anchoring me with the strange comfort of a weapon that had already saved my life twice. Its power core hummed through the grip, an impatient pulse urging me to move faster. The blast that hurled Corliss through the wall had torn half the arena structure open, and the damage was spreading like a living wound. If the dreadnought lost too many pressure seals, they would lock down the entire section or vent it to space. I had maybe minutes to escape, maybe less. I ducked into a side passage as a cluster of Dominion troopers rounded the corner behind me, their armor scraping the walls as they took firing stances. Plasma bolts shrieked past, carving molten streaks into the bulkheads. The air burned hot along my cheek. I dove into a rolling slide behind a collapsed support beam, bracing the Thunderjaw against the metal as I sighted down its heavy frame. One shot would reduce the corridor to scrap and probably punch a hole in the hull. I needed finesse, not annihilation. I slapped the mag selector twice, setting the chamber to compressive discharge. The round would hit hard without tearing the ship open. Probably. I fired. The recoil hammered my shoulder, rattling old injuries awake. The blast ripped the air apart in a violent ripple, flinging the troopers backward like leaves in a gale. Their bodies hit the walls and slid to the floor, unconscious or worse. The beam I crouched behind cracked down its length and sagged, but held. I scrambled out before it could pin me, lungs burning, ears ringing. The corridor ahead split into 3. Dominion glyphs marked each path, none of which meant anything to me. But airflows whispered clues. One passage carried the stale scent of recycled atmosphere. One reeked of coolant and oil. The third held a faint breeze and the subtle hum of engines. Ships always breathed toward their hangars. I sprinted down the third path. The damage worsened the farther I ran. Ceiling panels collapsed in sparking heaps, conduits dangled like severed nerves, and red emergency shutters blinked warnings as they tried and failed to seal automated bulkheads crushed out of alignment. Dominion crews scurried through the chaos, some dragging prisoners from the wrecked arena, others rushing to contain the spreading system's failures. A few reached for weapons when they saw me. Most froze, uncertain whether I was human or the cause of the catastrophic tremors traveling through the deck. One brave officer lunged at me with a staff weapon, shouting something that translated roughly to die quietly. I parried with the Thunderjaw's barrel and drove my elbow into his throat. He dropped without a sound. I kept moving. Then the deck pitched hard, throwing me sideways into a console. Sirens deepened into a low warning rumble. A mechanical voice growled through the dreadnought's speakers, Dominion language sharp and urgent. Laird had drilled enough of the basics into my head back on Earth for me to catch key phrases. Reactor overstrain. Compartment instability. Mandatory evacuation for sectors 9 through 14. I didn't know which sector I was in, but the way the floor vibrated under my boots told me it was one of the ones about to become very unfriendly. I burst into a wide corridor that narrowed into a grav lift shaft. Smoke billowed upward like a volcanic plume. Beyond the haze I glimpsed flickering blue lights and the silhouettes of cargo cranes. Hangar. My pulse surged. I sprinted into the shaft, leapt over the railing, and dropped to the level below. The impact jarred every bone in my legs, but I pushed upright and ran. The hangar opened before me in a sweep of chaos. Shuttles crouched in their docks like metallic insects, crews scrambling to secure flight routes, operators shouting over the wail of emergency sirens. Flames licked the far wall where a ruptured fuel line burned in spurts of white-hot fury. Dominion engineers sprayed suppressant foam in frantic arcs. At the center of the hangar sat a compact assault shuttle, engines spooled, hatch open while a pilot shouted orders to a squad of Dominion warriors. It was sleek, fast, built for short-range pursuit. It was also unattended at that exact moment. That made it mine. I sprinted toward it, weaving around crates and rolling fuel canisters, heart hammering against my ribs. A warrior on the left platform saw me and raised a plasma rifle, but the deck lurched violently again, pitching him into a wall. The pilot cursed and reached for the hatch controls, trying to seal the shuttle before the tremor worsened. I vaulted over a crate, closed the distance, and slammed into the ramp as the hatch began to close. My shoulder jammed the panel aside long enough for me to force myself inside. The pilot spun, teeth bared, blade drawn. He lunged. I drove my knee into his stomach and smashed his head against the bulkhead. He crumpled in a heap. Another tremor rocked the hangar. I stumbled into the pilot's chair, dropped the Thunderjaw Mk2 at my feet, and slammed the controls into override. Dominion interfaces were notoriously unfriendly, built by a species who valued raw function over usability. But flight was flight. Lift. Roll. Throttle. Fire control. Every species that reached the stars ended up solving the same problems. The shuttle fought me as I powered it up, its systems screaming warnings in Dominion glyphs. The hangar bay shields flickered wildly, half functioning and half collapsed. A swarm of Dominion engineers raced across the deck toward me, shouting. I cut the inertial dampeners to half, twisted the thrusters to maximum lift, and jerked the controls upward. The shuttle ripped free from its clamps with a metallic shriek. A Dominion warrior leapt for the ramp, missed, and vanished under the hull. Another fired a plasma bolt that scorched the side. I punched the throttle. The shuttle rocketed forward. The hangar blast doors struggled to close but froze mid-motion as the ship's power grid glitched again. I threaded the shuttle through the gap, felt the hull scrape sparks from the narrowing steel, and burst into open space. The dreadnought drifted behind me like a dying colossus, its hull fractured by the Thunderjaw blast and the cascading reactor failures spreading inward from the arena. Its port side glowed with uncontrolled heat. Shuttles and fighters swarmed erratically around it, unsure whether to pursue or flee. Then light bloomed from the dreadnought's spine. A white flare. A shockwave. And the Dominion flagship tore itself apart from the inside with a silent blossom of incandescent destruction. I felt the wave buffet my stolen shuttle, rattling the frame. I held the controls tight until the shaking passed. The Union Capitol hung in the distance, a cluster of glittering towers and orbital rings. Traffic lanes rippled with emergency.